Are you ready to do some more mixing? At the time that this video first airs, it is going to be the solar eclipse. And we are actually in the path of totality here in Maine, so that's going to be exciting. If you are all observing the eclipse today, be safe, use the right precautions, and I hope you enjoy it. So today, in honor of the eclipse, we are mixing Galaxy Black. Now, Galaxy Black is a super granulating mixture. This is a super granulating color put out by Schmincke. And it contains PBK11 and PB29. And we are going to take a look at Galaxy Black. And I'm going to show you just how you can mix it for yourself. This one is not too hard. All right, Galaxy Black. Let's look at it wet on dry first. And then we're going to do a wet and wet wash. Because these colors definitely will granulate more if you put them into a wet wash and give them room to float and move around. Tapping some of that out of some of the pigment and water out of my brush. We'll just watch that and see what it does. All right, so let's mix it up. Now, our mix today calls for PBK11, which Daniel Smith calls Lunar Black. If you're using this from another brand, it could also be known as Mars Black. And PBK11 is definitely a granulating color. And that's why these are called super granulating colors. There's nothing more granulating about this PBK11 than any other. The fact is that Schmincke is using 2 granulating pigments in their mixture, and that's why they are super granulating. So let's look at our Lunar Black. And you'll see here, I use mine from a Daniel Smith stick. I just cut my sticks and stick them into half pans. Our Lunar Black, and then our PB29. And on my Daniel Smith palette, I have made the switch from ultramarine to French ultramarine, just to see if it gives me more granulation. French ultramarine, or ultramarine itself, is a beautiful color to mix with, especially if you don't mind getting some granulation happening in your mix. So there are 2 pigments that make up Galaxy Black. Let's see if we can mix them. Now, this is showing up a bit more, it's looking a bit more blue, especially in a wet and wet wash. But I'm seeing the black sitting on the surface. So we're going to see if we can duplicate that. PBK11 is the first pigment that they have in the mix, and this is listed as a semi-opaque, non-staining color. Get some of that paint out of my brush. If you're doing mixes, it definitely makes your dirty water dirty faster, especially if you're mixing going from one color, rinsing going from one color to the other. And we have our ultramarine blue. I don't know that there's enough of that in there. Could be. Let's just see what we get. There may or may not be enough ultramarine in this mix, but we're going to see. I'm going to do wet on dry right here. Well, my mixture might be a little darker. We'll see. I'm looking here and here, this one and this one. And if it is, I'll just add a little bit more ultramarine. We'll swatch it on the card. Try one more time. Okay. So to start with, it definitely looks a lot darker. However, you have to give these mixes time to kind of settle and do their thing. So we're just going to leave that. Actually, it's kind of looking a little pretty similar right here. We might have plenty of ultramarine blue in that mixture. In fact, we might have a little too much. Just getting a little bit more of the black mixed in with this. And I forgot to wet my paper. Just grab a different brush, so I'll have to rinse that out. So here's our mix. And right now I'm not seeing a lot of the ultramarine blue showing up. And let's see if I can grab enough to do a little bit that's, again, that wet on dry. Wet on dry is going to look very different. You'll get much less granulation. My apologies. You guys can't see that. And let's get a wet wash here. Need a little extra water in my brush. Paint wasn't flowing off like I wanted it to. I'm trying to drop a little bit stronger pigment in this end like I have over here. I'm seeing a bit more of the black showing up on mine, but again, I added extra black. Maybe I shouldn't have, but we will see. Definitely seeing the blue coming through on this one quite a bit in my wet and wet wash. Just letting that color run back. It was pooling at this end. Look at the Schmincke already, how this is separating. See, I had a lot more black in my mixture. I'm going to try that mix one more time. PBK 11. Would you use this if you were painting like a galaxy sky? It'd be very interesting. I also encourage you to try other colors with your PBK 11. You can get some really interesting results. Our ultramarine blue. All right. I really hope that was not all off camera. I am mixing on the bee inspired watercolor paper I find this paper is wonderful for experimenting and trying things out. For the price, it doesn't feel too precious, and I think that is important when you are practicing and trying new things. Okay, that one right there may end up giving us the closest result. Again, off the thing. This one might give us our closest result to here. This is a mix that I could just really play with. I hope you'll give this one a try. It is a lot of fun. If you don't have PBK 11, I definitely recommend it. I recently got another granulating black from Magello Mission Gold, and that was Cobalt Black, PBK 27. And that is a very interesting granulating black as well. Just going to kind of let that run. Just tapping the extra off my brush and letting it run down the swatch. And you get such an interesting effect doing this. I'll just lay it flat and let that set, and I'll show you. It's really cool. At least I think so. But I find all of this just fascinating. I'm going to show you, before we go, the other black. So you see the difference. So this is the Mission Gold Cobalt Black, PBK 27, and here's Lunar Black from Daniel Smith, PBK 11. They are both beautiful granulating blacks. Let's try that mixed with the Cobalt Black. So if you don't have the PBK 11, but you do have this Cobalt Black, and I will link to everything in the description below. So if you see a color during any of these mixes that you don't have, but you would like to get and explore for your own palette, they will be linked below. I'm just grabbing some of that Cobalt Black. And I do have Ultramarine on that same palette. I'm just going to use my Daniel Smith one for right now. Look at the difference in that water. Oh my goodness. Okay, are you ready? I'm going to do one swatch. I have a lot of paint on my brush. I'm going to do one wet on dry. So just like those others. And then let's go ahead and do one wet and wet. And there's a lot of water pooled up at the bottom of the paper. Look at the difference with just the two different swatches of the Schmincke. I mean, it varies. You get some variation every time, but they look very similar here and here. You can really see that blue coming through. And in the mix right here, the first mix that I did with Daniel Smith, I think we're seeing that. Yeah, I have a bit of black setting right here, but that can happen sometimes even with the Schmincke. For example, I will show you my original swatch. When I swatched out all the super granulating colors, you see here, I had a lot of pooling of the black as well. That's this color right here. And so yes, that can happen. There's quite a difference between, those two swatches. But so looking at that, I think that the very first one actually came really close to matching the Galaxy Black by Schmincke. So it is PBK 11 with a little bit of PB 29 ultramarine blue mixed in. And again, I'm using French ultramarine. And you see the wet on wet swatches, they came pretty close. And looking at the one with the cobalt black, those are pretty close as well. We have to let this finish doing its thing to see what we get here. But I can already see the granulation if I'm looking at it from the side. Look at that happening. Like, look at how the black is setting right on top. It's gonna be beautiful. And then this was that very wet and wet where I just kept tapping and letting it run down. All of that black was like catching in the tooth of the paper on the way down. That gave a very interesting effect. Can you think of things where you would use something like that and that would just paint the texture for you on its own? And does this give you ideas? Like, what other color could I put in with this so that that background color would lend itself well in your painting? Here we had a lot more of the black. Again, I added more black just before I did this swatch. So I don't think that that is a good representation. I think this is a bit better. And again, here they're quite similar. Here, I have to share one more pigment that I think you might find a little interesting when talking about Galaxy Black and creating your own mixture that looks like Galaxy Black. I was about to wrap up and I happened to have a swatch catch my eye and I thought, you know, that might just work. Again, I forgot to wet my paper. Because this pigment on its own, I had a lot in my brush. I'm going to put it in here. Let's get that off my brush. And I'm going to kind of let that be to do its own thing because I'm already starting to see some granulation happening. This is a color that granulates very well on its own. It's deeper than ultramarine blue. You see the ultramarine blue here, right? In comparison, we're already starting almost the same as our Schmincke Galaxy Black. In fact, if I use it lighter, just tapped my brush in my water using whatever was left on my brush here. And I'm going to just leave that there. And we're going to take a look as this also starts to do its thing, comparing over here to here. And I'm going to mix a little bit more. Can you guess which pigment this is? I love to play Guess the Mix. We play over on Discord. If you are a channel member or patron and have access to Discord, every Sunday I post pictures of the mixture and you have to see if you can guess the mix. Can you be the first person to guess the mix? And can you guys collectively guess it before the video comes out? That's what we do. If you want to join us next week, just click join below and you can find out more information or visit my Patreon. And I think that might be a little bit too much black. I don't think I'm going to need as much black because this color is already so much darker on its own. All right, we're going to try. And then when I just have a little bit of paint left on my brush, I'm going to do one more right here. I had to compare. Have you figured out what this color is yet? It is on my Daniel Smith palette. So this is the Lunar Black, the PBK 11, with our new pigment that I just grabbed. I need to make sure I don't have too much in my brush. So I can do one more swatch. I just want to see if those kind of separate and play like they do over here. See, I have a lot of color pooling. I'm gonna kind of pull that. I'm just gonna pull that color down where there was a lot there. Just let it kind of spread out and do its thing. That could be interesting. We're gonna take a look and compare the two and see what you think in just a moment. I need to get these dried so that we can really see them in comparison. Just because I still have some sitting here. Just gonna do that one last swatch. All right, let me get these dry and we'll come back and compare, and I will let you know which pigment I'm using. Lunar Black and Ultramarine. That is our Schmincke pigments. Quite a bit in my brush. Actually, I'm not going to touch that. I think I just got it. And the more you mix them, the easier they become to mix. Of course, the more you mix a color, the more you might want to have the convenience version of that color. But this is drying beautifully. I think this just nailed it right there. I will show you a close-up of those two together in just a moment. However, how similar are these? So this color, if you guessed Sodalite Genuine, you would have been correct. And take a look at our Schmincke's Galaxy Black. Now, the blue is slightly different, but just slightly different. And look at here, the mixture that I did with the Daniel Smith Ultramarine and the Lunar Black. They look kind of similar. The Sodalite is just a little bit cooler of a blue than the Ultramarine. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's a cool blue. It's just a little cooler of a blue than the Ultramarine. And look at those two. Those are really quite similar. When I look at my swatch down here, if you had Sodalite Genuine and PBK11, you could also make something very similar. So I would say there's a bonus mix, but look at that. Yes, it is still drying. I've got a little bit extra black right there. But those two, I think those two look quite a bit alike. Do you like the Sodalite version? The Ultramarine Blue version? Or just Schmincke's version best? Again, I'm really curious to hear if you will be trying this mix. I forgot to hit record. I just did one more swatch with our Cobalt Black mixture right there. And it's actually looking still very wet, but really close to Schmincke's. So yeah, if you have Cobalt Black, you could absolutely use that in your mix instead. It's absolutely beautiful. And let's look at that Cobalt, the Cobalt Black, and here. Again, we can kind of compare them side by side. So what do you think? Is this one that you would mix yourself? I really do encourage you to give some other pigments a try with this, and I'm sure we may see other pigments involved with PBK11 in the future here on the Monday Mixes, because you can really do some fascinating things with your granulating pigments when you mix them together. If you are enjoying the eclipse today, view safely, enjoy the event, and drop me a comment. What do you think of today's mix? Galaxy Black. Did we achieve it? I really think we came close. I mean, that was our first mix. I think we came pretty darn close. This can just be a matter of how wet my wash was and how things settled. So it can be different every time. But drop me a comment and let me know what you think. And I'm going to pop another video up here that you might like to watch next. Until next time, my friends, keep mixing, keep creating, and I'll see you in a video real soon.